They say the worst part isn't the fall, it's what comes after the landing. You've just experienced what people call an ego death. Maybe it shattered you during a breakup that felt like the end of the world. Maybe it cracked you open during a crisis that left you questioning everything you thought you knew about yourself. Maybe it came through years of internal struggle that finally erupted like a volcano, leaving nothing but ash where your old identity used to be. However it happened, you felt it. Your old self, the mask you wore, the person you pretended to be, collapsed completely. And for a brief moment, it was almost peaceful, maybe even freeing. But now you're trapped in the silence. No goals ignite your soul. No dreams pull you forward. No clear sense of self to fight for. Just this hollow, empty space where you used to live. And that's where most people get completely lost. We think enlightenment means floating forever in some cosmic Instagram-worthy bliss. But the brutal reality, it's messy as hell. It's disorienting. It can leave you lying on the floor of your life, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember why anything even matters anymore. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who became history's most powerful philosopher, understood this darkness better than anyone alive. Asterisk the void after the storm. Asterisk here's where most people end up after ego death, floating in what I call the void. It's not depression, exactly. It's not even apathy. It's something far more unsettling. Nothing sticks anymore. The things you used to chase with burning passion, success, recognition, being somebody important, they don't feel real anymore. Goals feel like plastic toys. Affirmations taste like cardboard in your mouth. Those vision boards you made, they're gathering dust in your closet like relics from a past life. You don't lack motivation. You lack a self to be motivated for. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." But what happens when your way of thinking has been completely demolished? When the person who used to think those thoughts no longer exists? This is the point where most people make one of two fatal mistakes. Either they panic and desperately try to rebuild their old identity, like trying to put together a puzzle, with pieces that no longer fit. They force themselves back into relationships that feel foreign. They chase goals that taste like ash. They wear masks that no longer match their face. Or they go the opposite direction and completely give up. They numb themselves with Netflix, substances, meaningless hookups, or endless scrolling through other people's highlight reels. But Marcus Aurelius revealed a third path, one that most people never discover because it requires something our instant gratification culture has forgotten how to do: patience with the process of becoming. He understood that this void isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature. It's not a place you're stuck in. It's a place you're transitioning through. Think about it like this. When a caterpillar enters its cocoon, there's a stage called soup. The caterpillar literally dissolves into nutritious goo before reorganizing into a butterfly. From the outside, it looks like death. From the inside, it's the most important transformation of its entire existence. That's where you are right now. You're in the soup stage. And just like the caterpillar, you can't force the butterfly to emerge faster by breaking open the cocoon. You can't speed up the process with willpower or positive thinking or productivity hacks. The transformation happens on its own timeline, according to its own intelligence. Marcus Aurelius faced his own version of this void when he inherited an empire he never wanted. During plagues and wars he never chose. His private writings reveal a man who often felt lost, questioning his purpose, struggling with motivation. But instead of fighting these feelings, he learned to dialogue with them. He wrote to himself, with brutal honesty, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work, as a human being." Notice he didn't say, "I have to go to work because I'm passionate about it, or because it fulfills my purpose." He said, "As a human being." This is profound. He was acknowledging that sometimes motivation doesn't come from excitement or passion. Sometimes it comes from simply honoring your nature as a conscious being who chooses to participate in life, even when life feels empty. This is what I call existential momentum, the ability to move forward, not because you feel inspired, but because movement itself is an act of faith in your own becoming. It's not about feeling motivated, it's about acting in alignment with your deepest nature, even when that nature feels like a mystery. But here's the crucial part that most motivational content completely misses. This void period isn't something to be fixed or escaped. It's something to be honored. Because in this emptiness, something extraordinary is happening. Your old programming is being deleted. Your unconscious patterns are being revealed. The voice that's not your parents, not your culture, not your trauma, the voice that's authentically yours, is finally getting space to speak. Marcus Aurelius called this voice the God within, not in some religious sense, but as the part of you that exists beyond conditioning, beyond ego, beyond all the stories you've told yourself about who you're supposed to be. And this voice, it's been waiting your entire life for this moment, the moment when everything else finally gets quiet enough for you to hear it whisper your real name. Asterisk, the resistance trap that keeps you stuck. Asterisk, you've hit the void, that strange post-ego, death space where old motivations feel like foreign languages and new ones haven't learned to speak yet. Let's be brutally honest about this part. It's weirdly exhausting. You're not doing much of anything, but you feel completely drained. You want to move, create, build something meaningful, but it's like your body and mind are operating on different frequencies that refuse to sync up. Everything feels slow, heavy, pointless. And then comes the voice, that inner critic that sounds suspiciously like every authority figure who ever told you that you weren't doing enough. What's wrong with you? Other people don't struggle like this. You're wasting your life. You should be grateful. You should be productive. You should. Here's the paradox that most people never figure out. The thing holding you in that stuck place isn't the tiredness itself. It's your resistance to it. I know this sounds backwards, but stay with me. Every time you feel exhausted and then beat yourself up for feeling exhausted, you're not actually resting. You're wrestling. You're burning mental and emotional energy, trying to be in a different state than the one you're actually in. Marcus Aurelius understood this dynamic with startling clarity. He wrote, "How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself." But we can take this deeper. How much energy do we waste looking at what we think we should be feeling instead of what we're actually feeling? That resistance, that inner argument with reality, is what's draining you. Not the tiredness, but the fight against the tiredness. Not the sadness, but the shame about being sad. Not the lack of motivation, but the guilt about not being motivated. When we resist what's inside us, we split from ourselves. We create internal civil wars. We leak energy trying to pretend we're fine when we're clearly not fine. But what happens when you stop fighting? What happens when you let yourself be tired, fully, completely, without apology? Let me paint you a real-life picture. You're lying in bed at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Nothing sounds exciting. Your inner critic kicks in immediately. You're wasting time. You should get up and do something productive. Why are you like this? Everyone else has their life together. But what if, instead of spiraling into that familiar shame tornado, you said something radical? I'm feeling lazy right now. And that's perfectly okay. I'm going to feel it fully and not try to escape it, or fix it, or judge it. What you'll discover is that your nervous system immediately relaxes. That tight grip in your chest loosens. Your mind stops spinning its wheels. And maybe not instantly, but often within minutes or hours, something organic stirs. A curiosity about that book on your nightstand, an urge to call your friend, a random desire to reorganize your closet or take a walk around the block. That's not forced motivation. That's natural momentum emerging when you stop blocking it with resistance. Marcus Aurelius discovered this principle through his own struggles with what he called the tyranny of opinion, both others' opinions and his own internal judgments. He realized that emotions aren't good or bad from a cosmic perspective. They're just energy. Energy that wants to move, to be felt, to complete its natural cycle. Children understand this instinctively. Watch a 4-year-old have a complete meltdown. They scream, they cry, they throw themselves on the floor with theatrical despair. And then, 5 minutes later, they're building Lego castles like nothing happened. That's because they don't have beliefs about their emotions. They don't judge them as wrong or embarrassing or weak. They just feel them until the feeling moves through. We teach them to stop. We say big boys don't cry and calm down and don't be so dramatic. Slowly, they learn to suppress, to push down, to smile when they're dying inside. And that suppression creates what psychologists call the shadow, all the parts of ourselves we've learned to disown. Your real power lives in that shadow. Your creativity, your passion, your authenticity, your fire, it's all buried beneath layers of shoulds and shouldn'ts. So if you're feeling unmotivated, uninspired, or just plain weird, that's not your problem. That's your fuel. You don't need to fix it. You need to feel it. And when you do, it transforms from resistance into rocket fuel. Asterisk the creative power of embracing your shadows. Asterisk here's something that will blow your mind. Your negative emotions aren't your enemies. They're your untapped artists, waiting in the wings with paintbrushes in their hands. Most people spend their entire lives running from sadness, laziness, fear, and anger. But what if I told you these emotions are actually your creative superpowers, in disguise? Marcus Aurelius faced this revelation during the darkest period of his reign. Plagues ravaged his empire. Wars drained his resources. Political enemies plotted against him. He could have chosen denial, distraction, or the ancient equivalent of scrolling through Instagram. Instead, he did something revolutionary. He got curious about his darkness. In his private journal, he wrote, "The universe is transformation. Our life is what our thoughts make it." But here's what most people miss about that quote. He wasn't talking about positive thinking. He was talking about the transformative power of honest thinking, even when those thoughts felt uncomfortable or socially unacceptable. Let's get practical with this. Right now, you might be feeling lazy, uninspired, maybe even a little bitter about how your life has turned out. The conventional wisdom says to fight these feelings, overcome them, replace them with better ones. But what if you tried something completely different? What if you got playfully curious about these emotions instead of trying to escape them? What if you asked, what if my laziness was actually my creative muse? What if there's genius hiding in this tiredness? I'm not talking about spiritual bypassing or pretending everything is fine. I'm talking about artistic alchemy, the ability to transform lead into gold by changing your relationship with it. Imagine writing a poem titled Ode to My Laziness, or The Productive Power of Doing Nothing. Picture creating art that celebrates your confusion instead of hiding from it. What if your sadness became the water that softens stone? What if your fear inspired a story about the brave coward, someone who moves forward precisely because they're terrified? Your mind loves this kind of creative tension. It loves when something doesn't quite fit the normal categories, because that's where innovation lives. When you flip the script on your emotions, when you stop trying to escape them and start dancing with them, something magical happens. Your imagination wakes up. This is creativity at its core. Not the polished Instagram-ready version, but the raw, real kind that comes straight from the soul. It's messy, it's contradictory, it refuses to be categorized, and it's absolutely electric. Marcus Aurelius understood that our shadow emotions carry messages our rational mind can't access. They speak in symbols, metaphors, dreams, and strange synchronicities. They offer us language for experiences that normal vocabulary can't touch. Think about the greatest artists in history. Did they create their masterpieces from a place of perpetual happiness and motivation? Hell no. Van Gogh painted his most stunning works while wrestling with mental illness. Johnny Cash recorded his most powerful songs while battling addiction. Maya Angelou wrote about rising precisely because she knew what it felt like to be broken. They weren't successful despite their darkness. They were successful because they learned to collaborate with it. But here's the key. You don't have to be a traditional artist to apply this principle. Maybe your creativity expresses itself through how you parent your children, incorporating your own childhood wounds into deeper empathy. Maybe it shows up in how you run your business, using your experience with failure to connect authentically with struggling clients. Maybe it emerges in how you love your partner, letting your own heartbreak teach you tenderness. The point is this: when you stop seeing your difficult emotions as problems to be solved and start seeing them as collaborators in your human experience, everything changes. Your resistance becomes your material. Your wounds become your wisdom. Your mess becomes your message. Marcus Aurelius called this the discipline of desire, not the discipline of getting what you want, but the discipline of wanting what life gives you, even when what life gives you feels challenging or uncomfortable. This doesn't mean becoming a doormat or accepting abuse. It means recognizing that every emotion, even the ones society labels as negative, carries intelligence. Your anger might be protecting important boundaries. Your sadness might be processing necessary grief. Your fear might be highlighting something that truly matters to you. When you learn to listen to these voices, instead of silencing them, they stop being your enemies and become your advisors. They stop draining your energy and start fueling your creative fire. And that's when real motivation returns, not as something you have to chase, but as something that flows naturally from your authentic engagement with life. Asterisk, listening to the voice that's always been there. Asterisk, by now, you've probably realized something that most people never get to. The path forward after ego death isn't about pushing harder, it's about listening deeper. And this brings us to one of Marcus Aurelius's most profound yet misunderstood insights. The concept of your ruling center, what he called the part of you that exists beyond circumstances, beyond emotions, beyond even your personality. This isn't your job title or your relationship status or your Instagram bio. Marcus Aurelius's ruling center is your soul's operating system. It's the part of you that was there before your conditioning kicked in. It's who you were as a child before the world taught you who you should be. It includes your conscious mind and your shadow, your gifts and your wounds, your current self and your potential self. This deeper self wants to guide you. It wants to grow, evolve, express, and create through you. But here's the thing, it doesn't communicate the way your ego does. Your ego screams demands, do this now, achieve that. What will people think? Your ruling center whispers invitations. It sends messages through dreams that feel like clues, strange synchronicities that make you pause, random urges to write something, call someone, or explore a new direction. Feelings that don't make logical sense but somehow feel more true than facts. Intuitive hunches that your rational mind wants to dismiss, but we miss these signals because we're trained to only trust logic, only trust action, only trust measurable results. Meanwhile, motivation from your ruling center doesn't come from pressure, it comes from resonance, from noticing what feels authentically alive, even if it's quiet, from following the gentle tug instead of the loud demand. Marcus Aurelius spent years learning to distinguish between these two voices. In his journal, he wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." But he wasn't talking about mindfulness as a relaxation technique. He was talking about presence as a way of hearing what your deeper self is actually saying right now. In this moment, beneath all the noise, let's make this practical. You've been sitting in the void, letting yourself feel instead of constantly trying to fix yourself. And then, one random Thursday afternoon, this weird urge pops up. You suddenly want to rearrange your entire room, or research something completely random, or text someone you haven't talked to in months, or open a Google Doc and start typing sentences that don't even make sense yet. Your logical mind immediately kicks in. That's silly. What's the point? You have more important things to do. But that urge, it feels light, it feels expansive, it feels curious rather than desperate. That's your ruling center speaking. Follow it. Marcus Aurelius believed this kind of intelligence is where the real gold lives. When you allow both your rational mind and your intuitive wisdom to have a conversation, something new emerges. A direction that isn't forced, but revealed. A next step that feels both surprising and inevitable. But yeah, it's hard to trust this process, especially in a culture that treats rest like weakness, intuition like nonsense, and productivity as the ultimate measure of human worth. You were raised in that system. Of course you doubt yourself. Of course doing nothing feels dangerous. Of course you worry that if you don't figure everything out right now, you'll fall behind forever. But here's what Marcus Aurelius understood, that our hustle culture completely misses. The soul doesn't run on deadlines. It runs on alignment. And when you start honoring your natural rhythms, listening to your deeper impulses, making space for feeling instead of constantly forcing, something shifts. Slowly, then suddenly, you start wanting to move again, not because you should, but because it feels meaningful. You start creating, not to be productive, but to express something real. You reconnect with people, not to network, but to relate authentically. You pursue opportunities, not to prove your worth, but to explore your curiosity. This is when the real magic begins. Motivation stops being something you chase and starts being something you channel. You become a vessel for your ruling center, for life itself, for whatever has been waiting patiently beneath the surface of who you thought you had to be. Ask yourself, right now, what has my deeper self been trying to say lately? What quiet urges have I been dismissing? What feels alive, even if it doesn't make logical sense? If you don't know the answers, that's perfect. That means you're finally listening, and in that listening, your next chapter is already beginning to write itself. Asterisk, building a life that serves your soul. Asterisk, now, you might be wondering, okay, But what do I actually do with all of this? Because bills still exist. Responsibilities don't disappear just because I've had a spiritual awakening. The world doesn't pause while I figure out my deeper purpose. And this is where we bring everything full circle. Because here's the truth that most spiritual content completely skips over. You still have an ego. And that's not only okay, it's necessary. Marcus Aurelius never said the ego was the enemy. In fact, he understood that the goal wasn't to kill your ego, but to integrate it, to bring it into alignment with your ruling center. Your ego is your interface with the world. It's how you make decisions, set boundaries, protect yourself when needed, and navigate practical reality. It only becomes a problem when it starts pretending it's all there is, when it disconnects from the deeper source. So the path isn't about choosing between soul and structure. It's about letting your structure serve your soul. And this is where motivation takes on a completely different flavor. You're not moving just to achieve anymore. You're not building out of fear of falling behind. You're creating because you have something authentic to say, something unique to give, something that's been living inside you, waiting for space to breathe. Marcus Aurelius demonstrated this integration beautifully. He was simultaneously the most powerful man in the ancient world and a deeply spiritual philosopher. He managed armies and meditated on the nature of existence. He made life and death decisions while contemplating the temporary nature of all things. He didn't escape from worldly responsibilities, he transformed them into spiritual practice. This is your invitation. Start small, but start soulfully. Let your daily routines have rhythm instead of rigidity. Let your work have meaning, even if that meaning is simply showing up with integrity. Let your creativity have natural cycles, periods of intense output, followed by necessary rest, just like the seasons. Take care of your body because you love it, not because it's a productivity machine. Let your calendar have grace built into it. Let your mornings be soft if that's what you need. Let your evenings be sacred. Create boundaries that protect your energy instead of burning it out. And here's the crucial part. When resistance shows up again, and it will, don't fight it. Ask gently, what are you trying to tell me? Because now you know how to hear the answer. You've met the part of yourself that doesn't need to hustle to matter. You've begun to understand that your difficult emotions aren't blocks to overcome. They're messengers carrying keys to your next breakthrough, your next creative project, your next direction. This is the true gift of ego death. It strips away everything false so that what's authentic can finally speak. And when you let that authenticity shape your actions, when you let your shadow and your light work together to inform how you move through the world, you become whole. You stop performing and start expressing. You start pushing against life and start flowing with it. You stop chasing external validation and start trusting internal guidance. You stop trying to be someone else's version of successful and start becoming your own version of alive. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one." But I want to update that for our current moment. Waste no more time arguing what a motivated person should look like. Be motivated by what actually moves you. Be driven by what actually calls to your soul. Be productive in ways that actually serve your authentic becoming. This isn't just about finding motivation after ego death. This is about discovering a completely different relationship with motivation itself. One that's sustainable because it's sourced from truth rather than fear. One that's powerful because it's aligned with your deepest nature rather than fighting against it. That quiet knowing you might be feeling right now. That subtle shift in your chest. It's not loud or flashy or viral worthy, but it's real. And in a world full of artificial everything, real is the most revolutionary thing you can be. If this resonated with something deep in your bones, if you felt even a tiny shift while reading these words, then you're already on your way. The path back to your authentic fire has already begun. You're not recovering your old motivation. You're discovering a completely new way to be human. And that, more than any achievement or accomplishment, is what the world needs from you right now.